that 10% increase in eco or biodegradable friendly merchandise that is being sold. I think that as time goes on, we will, and the consumers themselves become more savvy or even more aware that these are options that are available to them. We will continue to see that increase in biodegradable merchandise. But this is also where it's going to be important for the funeral homes, the funeral directors themselves, to have that conversation with the families, because you don't know what you know until you're made aware of it. So again, if you're like me and you only somewhat recently got into this and learned that these are options that are available, I wouldn't have even known that. And this is something too where NFDA is now doing they do their consumer report. So there has been almost a 5% increase in families wanting more eco-friendly disposition options, so green disposition options, and whether that be alkaline hydrolysis or body composting, terramation, whatever term we want to call it right now. I would expect that trend to continue, especially now too that these different sides of the industry are starting to have their own conferences and these kind of talks, bringing that awareness more so to the consumer. So it'll be interesting to see how this data aggregates over time, and if this is something that truly should be on the traditional flame cremation funeral homes radar, or is this something that is it a fad and it's going to go away and flame cremation all day?
Yeah. Well, when it relates to the merchandise, what are you seeing in our data that would signify or not signify that, eco options are actually being preferred?
Sure thing. So the biggest thing is that eco-friendly merchandise right now is on more so the expensive side. I think we're starting around $400. So that can be cost prohibitive to the families that are making these arrangements. But even with that cost, we're still seeing a minimum of 6 of these types of merchandise items being ordered. When I say merchandise here, I am talking about the full-size urns and not necessarily the biodegradable or eco-friendly keepsakes. And another trend too, it really also depends on the location of the funeral home. So if I look more so on in the Southeast on more of those coastal states, even in California, those water burial urns are way more popular because of the accessibility to water versus places that are a little more mountainous. Arkansas right now, the number one urns are scattering tubes. So it also depends on a family's accessibility to those specific options to basically honor the way that that merchandise was designed to be used.
I'd like to just really get into the details, right? You've seen now thousands upon thousands of arrangements now. So what are some of the hottest urns in online arrangements today?
Hottest urns today, again, bearing in mind low cost direct cremation is the bread and butter of online arrangements. But the most popular urns today are our eco scattering urn that comes from the living urn. That one is priced just at $129. The other one, that is MSRP. That's is not MSRP, the cost right? Of the funeral home. That's MSRP. That's what the families are paying. Yeah. And then the other ones that are very popular are the Ocean Sunset Scattering Tube, priced at $99. And then from there is where we start getting into the slightly more expensive ones. So the next step up from there that families are choosing is, we call it the Avalon urn. It is just a bamboo chest. It's very simple, priced at $165 MSRP. And then families are going, I honestly wasn't expecting this urn to sell as well as it does, but it's our high gloss line. And it's just these standard stainless steel urns that come in red, silver, gold. Those ones are priced at $130. Had to look at my notes there really quick. I apologize for cheating. But when I first put those on the online stores for these funeral homes, it was just kind of a testing the water to see what would the reception be by families. Because when you look at these urns, they kind of look like cookie jars, for lack of a better term. Like they have like the twist off biscuit tin type deal. But families have been loving them. And it's been funny because even after submitting the demand forecast to our vendors forum, we can't keep them in stock. So it's interesting to see what families are choosing based on the type of arrangement and what kind of merchandise they're gravitating towards. Again, I know a large part of this is solely because of the cost, but that specific urn doesn't have the traditional urn design that we're used to seeing. It was slightly different, so that was unexpected. But it's neat to kind of see that trend in the consumer's behavior.
Awesome. So it sounds like the eco scattering, the bamboo. I mean, these are all
Correct.
relatively cheap or affordable, right? Sub 200. Is there anything else that gets a little bit more expensive, or are we all kind of seeing anything under 200? Is
Yeah. So the other urns that we are seeing that are on the more expensive side, bear with me 1 second. I should have had that pulled up. So this is where we start getting into more of those traditional urns. So we have the diamond urn, which is a blue one that has kind of silver etching engraving on it. It's kind of like a very pretty leaf snowflakey pattern. That one's priced at 230. And then once we get into the simple pewter urns, that one is a high gloss. We call it the Mirage urn. That one's priced at 230 as well. So it's not abnormal to see on average these prices. So we do see families typically going, those are the most popular items that I was previously discussing, but we still do see families that are choosing urns that are between the 220 to the 260 range. That's not abnormal, and that does make up a good chunk of what is being selected, those traditional urns. But the max that we do see families kind of being willing to spend on an urn is right around the 440 range. That's the sea turtle urn that we have, as well as those other urns that are meant for water burial. So again, but those ones, once you start getting above $300 for an urn, is kind of where you start seeing that drop off. So it's just something to bear in mind, especially if you are interested in doing online arrangements, making sure that you're pricing your merchandise appropriately. Because if you have an urn that's priced at $500, it's very unlikely that you are going to sell those. And it's also important to bear in mind who the demographic is that typically is doing these online arrangements. They are looking for that low cost direct cremation. So it's important to make sure that your merchandise is priced in a manner where those items are still accessible to those families. And another thing too, and I understand where the funeral homes are coming from, where, oh, I got to make up for lost revenue by increasing the cost of the merchandise itself. With online arrangements, Parting Pro specifically, and we just received this testimonial from a customer at ICCFA that we met. A lot of those costs are actually that you wouldn't typically charge for, like your bariatric case fees or the transfer fees if it's outside of a certain range. Those costs are already being recuperated, and you don't even have to necessarily have that conversation with the family. It's being done automatically. So, in the words of this funeral director that talked to us, if you're a big softie and you don't typically collect those in that face-to-face setting, you're already recuperating that revenue by having those online arrangements. So, if that is something that's important to you, just bear in mind you're already going to be increasing your profits and your revenue automatically without having to have that conversation. So you don't necessarily need to tack that on to the merchandise itself. And something I'm also working on too for both the funeral homes and the families is an actual catalog that is the pretty little flip book. So that way everybody can see what this merchandise looks like. And it just gives a nice, neat presentation without necessarily having to send a family through the online store. So that is something that's being actively worked on. We haven't had one previously, but it's going to be really pretty, I promise. Just picture the urns, though. Just picture the urns. They're there, I swear.
let's move into jewelry then. Are you seeing a lot of jewelry being
Yes, tons of
purchased as
jewelry.
well?
Tons of jewelry. I would say that a lot of times, second to the keepsake size scattering tubes, jewelry is going to kind of outperform everybody. And there is typically more jewelry being ordered. So the most popular styles right now are the traditional cylinder tube that you see all the time as a cremation pendant. The second one is going to be the filigree mom heart pendant. We have a ton of those sell. And then from there, it's different variations of hearts. So we have one model it's called the Pearl Heart pendant. It has some mother of pearl right in the center, and it has this really pretty filigree around the edges of it. And then the one after that, it's kind of weird to describe, but it's a heart locket, but the locket itself doesn't hold the cremated remains. It's actually a very tiny vial that you fill with the cremated remains that fits inside of that locket. And it still has that really pretty etched pattern around it. Those ones have been very popular. And then the next one that is going to be the most popular is it's called the roped cross. It is just a standard cross pendant, but it has kind of a very pretty intertwined pattern that is on the, what do you call it, the bars. Those are the ones that are currently the most popular. We do see families when they do order a cremation pendant, yeah, you will get those one or two, but it's not uncommon now to see families where they choose 4 to 6 of those pendants, but that everybody in the family gets their own type of design. It's not necessarily just blanket order 6 of this one style.
As the merchandising and having all this data, I do know that some of our clients will actually entrust you to, rearrange some of their merchandise selections. How much of an impact have you seen being able to use some of our best selling merchandise in the arrangements versus like something that they may have just thought of or put in originally without using the data as an indicator? Have you been able to see big changes in their contracts?
Yeah, so for our direct shipment funeral homes, I think that based on the data, and it's right now it's kind of hard to pull the data from the customers that are not currently participating in the program. So I don't want to give false numbers. But since we've been kind of optimizing our merchandise selections that are available through our dropshipping customers' online stores, and we've been working to make that available. I feel like this is all word salad, so I apologize. As we've been working to optimize the merchandise selections that are available for our dropshipping customers, month over month, we've seen at least a 3% increase in the number of orders. So, but you multiply that by over almost 1,700 arrangements, it's not an unsubstantial number. And again, going from 20% of families actually selecting merchandise to 23%, this is something where we are seeing that slow improvement. But the biggest thing for the customers that do not participate in the dropshipping program is, again, pricing the items to the point that they are inaccessible to families. So that way they almost always are going to go with the default container or the cheapest option that you have available. But if you have scattering tubes that are selling for, almost $200, families aren't going to be willing to pay for that. And this is too where we need to start considering that the consumers today are savvy. We are competing almost directly with Amazon, and Amazon has a ton of urns and keepsakes. And we always try to communicate the value in purchasing this merchandise directly from a funeral home with the guidance of a funeral professional versus just kind of venturing out on your own. We know the quality is there. So my one big warning would be just make sure that the merchandise, yes, you want to increase your merchandise revenue, but make sure that you don't price it to the point that it is inaccessible to families, or it's to a point where a family says, you know what, never mind, I'm just going to go to Amazon or Etsy to purchase this urn. We're in the e-commerce environment at this point, and this is who our direct competition is right now. And that's just something to bear in mind.